The Great Exodus, How Black Women Are Redefining Success Beyond Corporate America. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for what promises to be a conversation that will challenge everything you thought you knew about success, power, and professional fulfillment. I recently had the extraordinary privilege of interviewing LaTonya Keatz, a visionary leader whose groundbreaking research on Black women's leadership has fundamentally transformed our understanding of workplace dynamics in America. LaTonya isn't just documenting trends, she's actively reshaping the landscape of leadership theory through her fearless questioning of established norms. Her work has created a sanctuary of validation for thousands of women who felt isolated in their experiences while simultaneously challenging institutions to confront their systemic failures. What makes LaTonya truly remarkable is her refusal to accept surface level solutions. She digs deeper, asks harder questions, and demands more meaningful change than anyone else in this field. The insights I'm about to share with you today come directly from my profound conversation with LaTonya, and I promise you, they will disrupt everything you thought you knew about career advancement, leadership, and the pursuit of professional fulfillment. We've all seen the alarming statistics about workplace diversity. We've read the headlines about representation gaps. But today, I want to challenge how we frame these conversations entirely. Because what if what we're witnessing isn't just a crisis of retention? What if it's actually something far more revolutionary? Here's the counterintuitive truth that emerged from my conversation with LaTonya. The mass exodus of Black women from corporate America projected to accelerate through 2025 isn't just a troubling trend. It's a powerful act of self determination and innovation that signals the beginning of a seismic shift in how we define success in America. Let that sink in for a moment. While headlines focus on what's being lost, many Black women are intentionally choosing to leave environments that weren't designed for their success. They're not just fleeing, they're founding. They're not just quitting, they're creating. They're building their own businesses, redefining leadership on their own terms, and establishing new models for economic power that don't require them to shrink themselves or sacrifice their well being. This challenges everything about how we typically frame success. We've been conditioned to believe that climbing the corporate ladder is the primary path to professional achievement. But what if that ladder is missing rungs for some people? What if the very structure of that ladder is fundamentally flawed? The data LaTonya shared is staggering. Black women are now the fastest growing demographic of entrepreneurs in America. They're launching businesses at a rate that outpaces all other groups. They're creating economic opportunities, not just for themselves, but for their communities. And they're doing it despite facing the most significant barriers to capital, mentorship, and market access. Consider the story of Sherelle Parker, who in 2024 became Philadelphia's first Black woman mayor in a city where political glass ceilings had persisted for decades. Parker didn't just face the normal challenges of a mayoral campaign. She confronted entrenched skepticism about her readiness, encountering both racial and gender biases that questioned her capability to lead at every turn. Party officials who had never reported to a Black woman struggled with her decisive leadership style. Donors questioned her electability despite her impressive track record. But Parker refused to contort herself to fit into a system that wasn't built for her. Instead, she built cross sector coalitions with grassroots organizers who understood the real needs of communities that had been systematically overlooked. She leveraged mentorship from previous trailblazers, drawing inspiration from Shirley Chisholm's legacy of being unbought and unbossed. Parker's story becomes even more remarkable when you understand her background. Raised in North Philadelphia by a single mother after losing her father early in life, she navigated poverty and systemic barriers that might have derailed someone with less determination. She credits local educators who saw her potential and mentored her through adversity, teachers who stayed after school to provide guidance, community leaders who funded her first campaign when traditional donors wouldn't take a chance on her. The result? She won by mobilizing underrepresented voters who had grown cynical about politics. Her administration has prioritized inclusive economic development policies that benefit marginalized communities. Her victory signals expanding possibilities for Black women's political influence nationwide. Or consider Lisa Blunt Rochester, whose rise as one of two simultaneous Black women U.S. senators marks unprecedented federal representation. Rochester navigated persistent underrepresentation at national levels. No state had previously elected a Black woman senator until recently and faced constant skepticism regarding her electability. Political consultants advised her to downplay certain issues. Donors questioned whether America was ready for her leadership. Media coverage often focused on her identity rather than her policy expertise. Rather than accepting these limitations, Rochester focused on coalition building among diverse voter groups while championing policies relevant to working families across racial lines. Beginning as an advocate within Delaware's social services sector before entering politics through activism around healthcare equity, Rochester refused to accept the conventional wisdom about who could win statewide office. The impact of her success extends far beyond her individual achievement. Her win helps dismantle myths about electability while amplifying voices historically excluded from federal policymaking. She's now mentoring a new generation of diverse candidates, creating a pipeline that will transform American politics for decades to come. These political breakthroughs are significant, but equally important is what's happening in the business world. According to the Wells Fargo 2025 report that LaTonya shared with me, there has been explosive growth among Black women-owned businesses, now exceeding 2 million enterprises, generating $118 billion annually. This migration away from corporate jobs wasn't accidental. It was driven by burnout, lack of sponsorship, and daily microaggressions that took a cumulative toll on physical and mental health. Black women often lack capital, support networks, and industry connections when starting out. Traditional banks denied their loan applications at twice the rate of white male entrepreneurs. Venture capitalists invested less than 0.5% of their funds in their startups. But rather than accepting these barriers as insurmountable, a wave of Black women entrepreneurs embraced digital platforms that allowed them to reach customers directly. They leveraged gig work to fund their startups while building their customer base. They created their own accelerators and funding networks when traditional ones excluded them. The result has been a surge in successful tech startups, women led consultancies, and wellness brands led by former employees turned CEOs. The movement was catalyzed after years spent climbing stalled ladders inside large corporations. Many founders cite building instead of begging as their motivation, creating space where their talents are recognized rather than continuing to fight for acknowledgement in environments designed to overlook them. This represents a 32% increase since 2019, with multi-million dollar exits and new role models emerging across sectors. The impact extends beyond individual success stories to economic independence, redefine standards for professional success, and increase visibility and influence within local communities. Now, I want to be clear about something. This isn't about dismissing the importance of representation within traditional power structures. The fact that Black women remain dramatically underrepresented in Fortune 500 C suites, on corporate boards, and in state governorships is still a serious problem that demands attention and action. But LaTonya's insights help us understand that there are multiple paths to impact, influence, and fulfillment. Success doesn't have to look like what we've been told it should look like. Leadership doesn't have to be exercised only within existing institutions. Power can be built, not just acquired. When we examine the data more closely, three key insights emerge that LaTonya emphasized during our conversation. First, Black women's leadership is breaking historic barriers with record representation in state legislatures and major cities, even as significant gaps remain at higher levels, like governorships and Fortune 500 CEO roles. Second, the recent exodus of Black women from traditional workplaces is both a warning sign of systemic failure and an opportunity. Many are choosing entrepreneurship, gig work, or community leadership over burnout and exclusion. And third, support networks matter deeply. Research shows Black women remain the least supported group at work. Without senior sponsors or allies with real power, career advancement stalls, even when performance excels. This last point is particularly important. The myth of meritocracy, the idea that hard work alone guarantees success, has been thoroughly debunked. Yet it persists, particularly for Black women who are often told that if they just work harder, if they just get more credentials, if they just speak up more or less, if they just change their hair, their tone, their approach, then they'll advance. But LaTonya's research confirms what many have experienced firsthand. Without meaningful support, sponsorship, and advocacy from those with decision making power, exceptional performance often goes unrewarded and unrecognized. This helps explain why so many Black women are choosing to create their own tables rather than fighting for seats at tables that weren't designed with them in mind. The implications of this shift extend far beyond individual career decisions. They challenge us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about what makes organizations effective, what constitutes good leadership, and how we measure success. What if the exodus of Black women from corporate America isn't just a problem to be solved, but a signal that our existing models of work and leadership are fundamentally flawed? What if the alternative pathways being forged by Black women entrepreneurs, political leaders, and community builders offer insights that could benefit everyone? These questions invite us to think differently about power, success, and fulfillment. They challenge us to consider whether the traditional markers of achievement, corner offices, prestigious titles, organizational hierarchy, are actually serving anyone well. So, where do we go from here? What's your role in this revolution? If you're a Black woman navigating these decisions right now, know this: your worth isn't determined by your willingness to endure broken systems. Your leadership doesn't require institutional validation. Your vision deserves investment, whether that comes from venture capitalists or from your own reallocation of time and energy. If you're an organizational leader, understand that diversity initiatives that don't address power dynamics are destined to fail. Representation without influence is tokenism. Inclusion without transformation is just performance. And if you're someone who simply cares about creating a more equitable and innovative society, pay attention to the pathways being forged outside traditional structures. Support Black women owned businesses, amplify their voices, invest in their visions, because this exodus isn't just about leaving, it's about leading in new directions toward new possibilities with new definitions of what success can look like. The question isn't whether Black women will continue reshaping the landscape of American leadership. They already are. The question is whether the rest of us will have the wisdom to follow their lead. Thank you.